yesterday during the afternoon, we conducted a strike against Ibrahim Biari. Ibrahim Biari has 2 decades of experience in killing Israelis. A senior commander of the Hamas terrorist organization who had pre-positioned his capabilities within the civilian arena, within Jabalia. And indeed, we conducted a strike against him. And what we can see is that the position where we took him out and engaged him with his surroundings, supporting terrorists, the people that conducted the attacks. What we can see in the footage is that the building actually collapsed into the tunnels that they're operating in. Indeed, a huge challenge for any military that is operating, and we are conducting our strikes against Hamas, their leadership, their terrorists. And specifically, this is the reason why for now 3 weeks, we've been asking the people of the north to go south.
Colonel, did the IDF know there was a risk of civilian casualties?
We know that Biari was hiding specifically in Jabalia. We know that they had intentionally positioned all of their capabilities, their command and control. We know that from these types of places, he launched his attack against Israel on the 7th of October. The civilian casualties of this war are truly tragic. And we see that this terrorist organization that has no regard for human life are intentionally putting the people at risk. We are going out of our way to try and limit that. And indeed, they utilize tunnels. They utilize their attack capabilities in order to conduct this. They're even proud of it. They distribute the footage extensively, showing how they've built these tunnels beneath ground. And it's not just beneath ground, it's beneath the people of Gaza. This is the challenge we're facing. We have to take them out. They have to be removed from control of Gaza. That is our responsibility.
Explain to me, Colonel, how it is that what happened yesterday is not against Article 51 of the Geneva Convention that says prohibits indiscriminate attacks, which are those that may be expected to cause incidental loss of civilian life.
There are also conventions that identify the need of military necessity. And I would say if Biari, given the chance, do you think he would butcher and murder and massacre Israelis again? I don't think there's any question that any decent person would understand. And therefore, there is indeed military necessity in order to take him out of the equation, to make sure he can never wield that sword of death above anybody's head again. And this is why the Hamas are utilizing the civilian arena, and it's specifically for you to ask me that question. And we operate out of the ideas and the principles of both distinction, but also military necessity, and weighing up the proportionate responses of those military needs. So
Colonel, I must interrupt you there, if I may. I mean, you must have known, you have some of the best intelligence in the world. You must have known that there would be incidental loss of civilian life, which is against Article 51 of the Geneva Convention, and yet still you went ahead.
Okay, I don't know to say that we knew the extent. And I would also be very, very cautious in judging and coming to any. I noticed that you haven't mentioned numbers because we don't know the magnitude of how many of those were actually Ibrahim Biari's cronies, those terrorists, those that conducted the attack against us on the 7th of October. So, of course, when we've been calling for the last 3 weeks for civilians to evacuate, and happily we've seen that a huge amount of people, over 1 million people, have listened to us. We need to ask ourselves, and why did Hamas discourage them from evacuating? Why did Hamas want them to stay in the civilian arena? Why has Hamas been threatening and operating in a way that intentionally puts them at risk, while we are trying to get them out of harm's way? And indeed, the strikes in the civilian arena against Hamas, against their infrastructure, against their tunnel, against their command and control positions, they're going to continue because we are determined to destroy Hamas and dismantle their regime. They cannot be permitted ever again to wield the power of a government that utilizes all of the tools of government to carry out the atrocities that they did on the 7th of October. So indeed, the civilian arena is the part of the tragedy that Israel is facing here. But it is a tragedy, nevertheless, on the shoulders of Yahya Sinwar, who is the mastermind of this massacre, and Mohammed Def, who is the operator. So these are the people we need to ask, how many people are they willing to sacrifice? How many people are they?
Time and so much to get through. We had Dr. Omar Abdul Manam, a paediatric neurologist who's here in the UK, on the programme earlier on this morning. He says a child is dying every 8 minutes, but he went on to make this suggestion that from the injuries he's seen, white phosphorus is being used in Gaza. Is it?
That's a very professional observation from London, from the comfort of his sofa. I would be very cautious. No, I'd be very cautious in trying to judge any of the professional activities that are taking place. The IDF operates within the realm of the laws of armed conflict. The tools that we utilize are in accordance to the international humanitarian law.
Is it being used?
Is a huge challenge, and international humanitarian law does not prohibit
phosphorus being used.
Okay, the laws of armed conflict do not prohibit the use of.
Is it being used?
Explosives. And I don't have any instances where it has been used, but it can be used.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you for the clarification. You're saying it's not been used. I'm going to take your word for it, sir. You're on the ground.
Okay,
so you're saying it's not being used.
But I would say there are legitimate ways to utilize different munitions.
I asked you if it was being used. You said it's not. I'm going to take your word for it, sir. What's the next phase of this war?
I think the only end game of this war will be when Hamas cedes the ground. I mean, as I said, they could end it today. They could come out with and say no more deaths, please. But unfortunately, we know that they won't do that. They have no regard for human life, and they are willing to sacrifice all of the people of Gaza. Our goal is to remove them, destroy their capabilities, bring home the 240 Israelis and foreign nationals that are still being held hostage by Hamas. That is our goal. I wanted to ask
you about that, Colonel. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, if I may. Reports more hostages could be released today. How credible is that, or is that just another false dawn for the families?
So we've seen a lot of psychological terrorism that Hamas has been conducting around the issue of hostages. We've seen the IDF's efforts in bringing Ori Megidish home, rescuing her. Our efforts are ongoing. I think there's a lot to be said about the hostage issue. I think primarily Hamas are responsible for their well-being, and we expect the International Committee of the Red Cross to have immediate access to them to assess their well-being. Unfortunately, we don't trust a word Hamas is saying. We can't trust an organization, a terrorist army that butchers babies in their bedrooms for any word that they say.
Colonel, final thought. I appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning. What news on the Rafah crossing?
So I saw your report. We've had, over the last week, we've seen an ever increase in the humanitarian access that is going into Gaza. I think that there are confirmed reports that there is some medical assistance that Egypt is extending to people. And yes, this is part of the reality of war. There needs to be humanitarian access. We understand that. The Americans have also requested that we facilitate, and we are facilitating it. Within the understanding that Hamas will most likely abuse that as well.
We must leave it there. Colonel, thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay.